All right, in this presentation, we're going to go over the Python print function. So let's take a look at the objectives here, understanding how the print syntax works, utilizing the print statement, and we'll have a couple of examples, understanding how the quotes work, both in terms of single and double quotes, understanding how escape characters and control characters are utilized, understanding and looking at different optional print parameters, and looking at comments in the code. So there's quite a bit that we need to go over in this. So let's take a look at our basic syntax for our print statement. So we have the keyword here of print, and then basically from there we have our what we call the objects. Now once again here we have our print function. Basically it's a built-in function in Python, and then we have our object, and the objects right now are generally configured or explained here that it is going to be representing items that you want to print, right? Provide basically one or more objects separated by commas initially, okay? So these objects will then be printed to the console. Console simply meaning that is going to be printed to the screen. So the print function is going to be utilized to output the Python program. And so here is a sample of print hello world. So let's take a look at our programming component here. So here I have hello world, and I'm going to basically run it. And as we can see, when we run it, we have the keyword hello world, or the output statement there. Now I could also utilize the print statement by just simply saying print and then open and close paren. And you notice that when we're utilizing this programming IDE, it's fairly intelligent that when we start typing in brackets and quotes and that, so I just typed in the open paren, it did the close paren automatically. I'm going to type in the double quotes, and then I'm saying this is fun. Let me make sure I get the correct spelling here. And then when we run the code, so you'll notice now there is a gap in between here, because if we take a look at the code, so you can see that this particular print statement is just printing out a blank line. So that's the whole purpose of that particular print statement. All right, let's take a look at in detail of what it is in terms of a quick little breakdown. So we have our print statement, which is the function. We have our open and closing parentheses, and then we have our so-called object. So our so-called object here was hello world. Now you notice also that the object was also contained in quotes. This is referred to as a string in terms of the different data types. So that's your basic structure of your print statement. Now again, we're able to utilize single or double quotes. Now this seems like, well, that's pretty easy, but there's going to be different criteria or conditions where things may not work out the way you think they're going to work out. So let's take a look at this real quick. So let's look at this one and say that print I am here. You notice that we have a combination of a double quote and then a single quote. Let's take a look to see how the coding works for that. So let's say here we have print, open paren, then I'm here, and then when we run this, you notice that this basically works, not a problem. But now what about if we change it to single quotes? Well, let's go ahead and take a look to see what happens here. So if we basically take a look at here, I'm going to change this one here, and I'm going to utilize single quotes. So we both end there, and we run it. Now this is a good, because we got an error here, and the reason why we got an error, so you notice that we have an error on line 3. So when you basically are coding, you're definitely going to get errors, and when it gets to that point, it is very intelligent that it knows in terms of where the error may be. So in this particular case, we're looking at line 3, and we're looking at this particular element there, and it's basically identifying that we have a invalid syntax of some sort. So let's take a look to see what that actually means. And when we actually look at the code here, yes, I end up utilizing a single quote, but so you notice how this is actually highlighted. So it's kind of unique because it's no longer red. Now the reason being is instead of utilizing the correct quote, this is a back quote. So if I basically do a regular quote, you can see that now everything corresponds. So nice thing about the different editors is they're very helpful, they're graphical, they're visual, they have different colors to identify what things should be. So visually you're able to identify things real quickly here. So I'm going to go back over here and basically clear my screen and run the code again. And you'll notice that this basically ran, just, on that part. Now, again, we're going to change this over here to the correct single quote here and run it through here. All right, so we get a single quote, and you kind of are looking at it and you should be identifying something that is kind of weird, because this is not matching what the colors are over here. So let's run the code and see what happens. Well, we do have an error. As you can see that we have an error on line 4, print statement, and this is an invalid syntax. So why is it invalid? As we look at the code, well, there's something goofy going on with the quote. So remember, as I mentioned, we have different reasons for structuring the print syntax and the ability to utilize single and double quotes. All right, another thing I'm going to get into real quick before we get into too much coding and not enough in terms of a documentation, especially utilizing comments. So let's take a look at how important comments are going to be in the code. So if we take a look, it's basically code documentation. It provides code readability as well as collaboration, because you're going to get into projects and teams and someone does one piece of code, someone else does another one, then you're going to go back and maybe the person needs some help, or the person's no longer at the company. You need to understand in terms of what happened to the code, so you need to make this a best practice. Utilizing for debugging and troubleshooting, for code review, maintainability, as well as certain compliance and standards. So having comments in your code is critically important. You may understand what you're doing in the code right now, but I'll tell you what, coming back 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, or even 3 or 4 months later, it's going to take a lot of bit of time to kind of reacquaint yourself with the code versus just looking at the comments and understanding it basically in a quarter of the time, maybe even less. So these are different methods. We're going to utilize a single line of code or inline comments, and that's going to be utilizing by prefixing the hashtag symbol or the tic-tac-toe symbol. So if we go back to the code here, and comments do not appear in the output. So let's go ahead and do this. This is a print statement using, and then we'll say single, if I could type today, single quotes. So you do it basically above, below, or you could do it this way. Now, here in the code, now you notice that it's not identifying a green component here, because again, there's something wrong here. So if I did the same thing, print statement, so you can see that that basically works right there. So again, there's something wrong with here, which we'll go back and cover in a moment there. We can also use multi-line comments, or basically blocks of code, and we end up utilizing either triple quotes, triple single quotes, or triple double quotes. Sounds weird, but that's what we're going to look at. So meaning this, so if I come back over here, I could give the programmer a note here, and here I'm utilizing triple single quotes to start out. Let's see, there is an error in the program. Please take a look. And then we'll end this here. And then when we do another one, so that's how we do basically blocks of code. I mean, I could change this to triple quotes here, triple double quotes, and that's how we do basically blocks of code. So again, it's a very important element and concept to have in your particular code. So as we start going through our programs, initially you're going to be commenting on some of the elements. As we go through more advanced code, you're going to be commenting more on the blocks of code, what the purpose of variables are, what functions you have imported, etc. So keep that in mind.